Welcome to the worst of the best podcast. You wanted the best. Well, they didn't freaking make it! So here's what you get. From Canada
and Florida,
Ryan and
Drew.
Hi, Ryan.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good. How are you?
Good, my friend. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear, brother. My lips are very shiny because this lighting makes me look like I've got makeup on, but it's just, I don't know why it's so red.
Well, I haven't seen you in a while. We were going to discuss the changes in your appearance at some point, I'm sure.
I gotta wear makeup for the camera. So I got lip gloss on because it's so dry here.
How's it cooling off for you?
It's not bad. It's overnight, couple degrees under 0 Celsius. So we're getting...
I can't make any sense out of that at all.
What's freezing water in Fahrenheit?
32.
Okay, so it's a little bit under 32.
Oh, that is chilly. Yeah. That is chilly, yeah.
But all in all, it's not too bad. The winter is coming, as they say on HBO.
It's inevitable, right? Every year.
If we're lucky, we get to experience it every year. If you don't experience it every year, then you're not here to worry about it, I guess.
Sound the alarm.
Yeah. Well, I know the time of this recording. This is pre-election week. When this comes out, it's going to be 3 weeks from now. Why don't we do a little something? We'll just pretend Biden won. Tell me your thoughts if you don't mind. And let's pretend Trump won and tell me your thoughts if you don't mind. And then I'll just edit whatever the response is into the...
I can't believe you're giving me this opportunity. Wow.
Make it quick. 1 minute, Biden won. Go.
There's a lot of work to be done, I'd say. That's just the first step. Unsure about really how the Senate comes out and how the House comes out. But if people who are somewhat liberal or call themselves Democrats want to achieve the things that we need to achieve to put our country at least back where it was, if not everyone's goal, let's make it a little bit better. Let's not go backwards. We probably need all three of those to really be able to effectuate the very quick changes that we need to make to sort of roll back a lot of the really inappropriate moves that were made by the previous administration.
Okay, so Biden's won, and he's going to pass away in a year. Kamala Harris, now, how does this work? Does she take over for the whole presidency until a re-election?
That's right. She would, if Biden died 1 year in, Miss Harris would have a 3-year term. And then I'm not sure how they'd phrase it or whatnot, if she would be referred to as an incumbent at that point, but she would certainly have 3 years of presidenting under her belt, assuming that she doesn't pass during that time. I think a lot of people's assumption is that Biden will not be running in 2024, that quite potentially Harris would be the one to run for president off of that ticket in 2024. And that's just a product of having two incredibly old men running for this position this year. Both of these guys are older than the people that we elected in 92 and 2000 are now. That's just how much things have changed. I think that at one point Biden did make a promise that he was not going to run for a second term. He has not done that lately, but I do think that it might be something that's probably best for him to consider.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go, folks. There is our election coverage. It's a pretty big moment, of course, in American's history. U.S. has a big week ahead of them, but at the time of this release, it's going to happen. So I wish the U.S., whoever has won, all the best. I will say this. I'll edit accordingly. Congratulations, Mr. Biden and Kamala Harris. Hope you do well.
Okay. Really appreciated the opportunity to do that with you, Ryan. I always appreciate your take on these things. I think that you're able to see more of the comedy in it, and I certainly see more of the tragedy.
Of course. It's your house, and I understand that, and I know. Unfortunately, we're not a political podcast. On the Gamma Gator Production Network, we do have one, and that is the One Big Toilet podcast. So I'm sure Tony of that podcast will have a lot to say, regardless of who wins. And not only that, he says it quite well. Drew, do you believe in a higher power?
I do, and that's an interesting question given this topic that we have today. We've chosen to discuss the 10 scientific hints of possible higher beings. I'm not entirely certain that this higher being that we're talking about is the sort of spiritual religious God that you may try to tie those two things together. We're sort of discussing higher beings that may be seen as evolutionarily beyond us and able to create life. These are higher beings that are creators of life. They are not necessarily moral guides in any instance. Believing in a higher being may be a different thing than believing in a God.
I think at the end of the day, this is not a religion or a religious topic or conversation, though religion might come up as we talk about these topics, because
Certainly, yeah.
I believe is that religion in and of itself, or the construct of religion and gathering under the umbrella of religion, is man-made. Religion is like having your favorite team, your favorite sports team, your favorite musical artist. It doesn't matter. You go to a concert and you feel the spirit. You have a great time at a concert and you can feel emotional and feel united with the audience, with the performer. I think religion is a little bit about that, where you have a performer and a way of thinking, and everyone else is like, yeah, I like this idea too. And you get together and it feels good to share that commonality. Because we're on this planet, yeah, because people are like, how did we get here? Well, like, why is grass green? Why is chocolate sweet? And how come bees pollinate the flowers the way they do? Like, I understand the way the world is and everything that's put together. It's a fascinating structure. The fact that we exist as human beings, the fact that we just are in of itself, would lend to the question for us humans is, why do we exist?
Why rather than why not?
But I used to be very religious, and I stopped attending my faith and prescribing to it as a lifestyle. However, there's things within my upbringing and within my faith that aren't all bad or aren't worth having. Like, I believe in showing love. I believe in charity. I believe in kindness. I believe in spirituality. I believe that it's good to meditate or to count your blessings, to think about others, to put others before yourself. All these things are Christian tenets, and I think they're ways of just being good. So I believe in morality, and I think sometimes people, if they stop going to church or they don't have a religion that they prescribe to, they can't be moral. And I think it's a terrible thing to say to somebody. You can have complete good morality without having a religion umbrella over that.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of different explanations and rationales for why religion was created, but you certainly did boil it down initially. It's a human construct.
I used to believe that I came from God in the sense of like an actual physical father, and that I came to earth. And my time on earth was a test. If I was good, I get to go to heaven. We all know this. We all know the Christian belief, and most religions have this concept of do the tenets of the religion and you'll get rewarded in the next life. You don't do the tenets of that religion, you don't go to heaven, you go to some sort of hell, the opposite of heaven. And that's your basic construct of most religions. Do what you're told, you get rewarded. You don't do what you're told, you're not rewarded, depending on how you want to word it, or you go to a hell.
Just tag on to that. Do what you're told that is morally right. Because this is all about instilling in people some series of values. Those values are not inherent in any way. They are created by people who sat down and wrote down the values. That's sort of how it is designed to, control people by making them think that this is the thing that they should do, the morally good. These are the things that they shouldn't do, the morally bad. And those may change over time as we loosen some restraints on people within religion. But at the end of the day, that's how God gets wrapped up with this. He's both the person that put you here and the thing that you're aiming towards, maybe to be joined with in another life or what have you. But he's also told you how to live your life while you're around here. And that's the moral portion, in hopes that you may get somewhere else or something of that sort. I think that's sort of a constant throughout a lot of the religions of the world. And I hate to be reductive.
This is a list of 10 scientific hints or theories that have been proven by science or math of a possible higher being. So basically, it's more than just, is what I'm trying to say, is more than just people saying, hey, I think there's a God, or I think there's a higher being. Science and the scientific method, something that most humans prescribe to or agree upon. It's not a bad way to go to figure things out. I mean, the fact that we're communicating on the internet was done by science, right? Science has given us a lot for humans, from heart surgery to medicine to putting man on the moon. So science is good, but it doesn't mean it's always right. But so here are 10 scientific hints of possible higher beings.
I think scientific hints here is actually a much more expansive. There could be a more expansive title for this list.
I think so. We can maybe reword it.
What I mean by it is that it touches on these areas of biology, of technology,
right,
of math,
yep,
of philosophy. Certainly,
okay.
It touches into these areas where, yes, you could reduce a lot of these things to science, but not all of them are commonly considered that way. As I was really looking at it, I think that if you're sort of, maybe the wrong word, but simple-minded about looking at these, you may think that some of them are the same. But really what the list is it's showing you, here's one piece of evidence of some sort that may point you to this. Right. And sometimes here's another piece of evidence that may point you to the same thing. The end of it, the list is talking about the pieces of evidence that we sort of have to look at, be it a study or a equation or a philosophical thought experiment at some times. These are pieces of evidence that point to the fact that there may be some sort of a higher being that is a creator, that is the reason why there is life instead of not life.
All right, like it.
Does that make sense?
I think so. I think you're very smart, and I think we have some smart listeners. Don't worry about me.
Did you know that you were bringing me on the podcast and I have a degree in philosophy?
I didn't know you had a degree. Did I know this?
I have a degree in philosophy. Now, I also have a Juris Doctorate, but my undergrad, there's not really a pre-law designation at a lot of schools, so they sort of point you in a direction. Mine was a philosophy degree. I have a Bachelor of Arts.
Wow.
And so that's my approach to a lot of these things. And I think if you give me the time, I may, during this list, break into some of these things that are thought experiments or famous allegories or things that this is how I relate to this list and this is how I boil it down. Other people may have different ways of doing it, but I certainly did enjoy being able to tackle this list with you. And
it's interesting that I picked this. This was one that interested me to talk about, and little did I know of the connection you were going to have with it. So that's great.
What was it that you thought about initially when you thought about this list? Do you think about science, or do you think about philosophy? Do you think of how it's been presented in pop culture? What do you think?
I love philosophy, and in fact, I studied philosophy in university as well. I don't have a doctorate. I did about 3 philosophy courses, and I got A+ of them. For whatever reason, I excelled at it when I did it.
It's fun.
It is fun. It's just fun to think. You're just expounding on thought, and if you're able to articulate it well, I guess you get a good grade, and I guess I was able to. When I left my faith, I used to have the comfort of knowing of where I came from and where I was going. I admit, when I first kind of let go of the religion, I panicked a little bit. I'm like, okay, then now what? Okay, I still exist, and I still believe in being good, but what does that mean? And so I have studied a variety of different thoughts and ideas and philosophies, and from scientists to philosophers, modern-day philosophers, to free thinkers, you name it. And I'm trying to find my own personal journey from people who are much smarter than me. So
do you have a favorite?
Well, the one I went to at the very beginning, and the one I really quite enjoyed, of course, was Sam Harris. He helped me get my head around, not be so afraid of death and why we exist. See, I kind of moved on from him in some ways. Personally, I do believe in the spiritual. I believe in the idea that our souls or our being exists outside of this life. He believes in the finality of this life. That's fine. That's his belief. I believe we continue. So I agree with a lot of the ways he thinks we should be while we're here, but I believe that we will continue in some way, and I have some ideas about that, but personal thoughts, but I believe we continue to some degree after.
I certainly would agree with you. People would call it a soul. Rene Descartes called it the mind. There are things that exist out of the physical world, and that's who we really are. Perhaps a lot of these kind of topics that we'll get to will sort of open up perhaps how detached we may really be from what we consider the physical.
I actually just watched a documentary. I'll give it a plug. It's Who We Are. It just came out. It's on YouTube. It's free to watch. It's called Who We Are. One of the speakers to this documentary brought up a really good analogy, and I love analogies.
I think it's important to be clear that the brain and the mind, or the brain and internal experience, are clearly correlated with each other. So there's a relationship between brain activity and our internal experience. But that relationship actually doesn't say very much about what is the causal direction. The usual presumption is that the brain processing is the causal reason why we have consciousness. But that's an inference that would be very difficult to justify, because it could just as well be in the other direction. In fact, this is what gives rise to ideas that it's not that the brain is generating consciousness, but rather the brain is receiving consciousness, or is a filter of consciousness which is somehow out there. This is the difference between looking at a radio and listening to it playing music and opening up the radio expecting to find little tiny people with instruments in it. Well, that's not what happens. You open the radio and you see something which ultimately is receiving information that's coming from somewhere else.
The radio is actually receiving information from outside the radio, and that is then being transmitted to you. If you open your mind, so to speak, to other channels, to the universe, you are actually the radio receiver. You are not creating the music. You are receiving it. Once we leave this mortal coil, so to speak, the brain that's the radio, you go out there, you realize, oh, the universe is full of radio waves. And my brain was just a radio on the desk.
It was just a piece of the whole puzzle. It was just there to sort of receive the signals that were already out there,
right,
that, other things cannot perceive. Rocks cannot perceive radio signals. Trees cannot perceive. Right. But humans have evolved brains, and brains are able to do that. I'm very excited to get into this. Are you handling number 10?
Yes, I am. So number 10 is the idea that the universe itself shouldn't exist. I've actually asked this to myself. And I actually Googled the question on Google just to see what answers would come up. I said, why do we exist? Why does life exist? The idea that existence exists. Is that a weird thought?
Incredibly. Try to absorb a bit of Neil deGrasse Tyson. And I really do enjoy, he sort of constantly goes back to the sort of chances that life would exist instead of not existing is 1 in a billion of some sort. That's the evidence of a guiding hand.
According to studies, the universe should not have survived more than a second. For example, the Big Bang, which we all know about, should have produced equal amounts of matter and antimatter, canceling each other out. Instead, slightly more matter was produced, creating the entire observable universe that we now see. In another theory, have you heard of this? The universe is in the Higgs field, which gives particles their mass. So a large energy field stops our universe from falling into the valley, a deeper field, where the universe couldn't exist. So it's like we're on this precipice of existence. Like all these things are just meeting the right balance to exist. If the standard model of physics is correct, a rapid expansion of the universe immediately after the Big Bang should have moved the universe into the valley. This would have destroyed the universe before it was 1 second old. But that didn't happen. The impossibility of life on Earth is also very unlikely. So galaxies couldn't exist without the right mixture of matter, dark energy. Then Earth itself had to be the right distance from the sun. A Jupiter-sized planet also had to attract more asteroids and comets to help protect the Earth, or the Earth's surface itself would be too violent to sustain life. So if you just think about the Earth itself, forget the universe, the stars, the suns, everything else that's just out there. The fact that we exist on this planet that can sustain life, that's somehow just the right place away from the sun. We have our seasons, we have air to breathe, we have food to eat, and then the food has food to eat. It's all crazy, man. What are the odds?
It was all perfectly put together. Exactly. What are the odds? We know so much about a Big Bang that we are so sure. Nobody's seen a Big Bang. What are we really talking about? But we are positive if it was a Big Bang, it should have produced this and this, but instead it produced this. And so why? There's this big mystery because we are so sure in our studies. And then you've got the thing about the Higgs field, which basically insinuates that there's a mysterious energy force that is stopping us from not existing, which is, that's sort of your invisible hand or your guiding force. It's just somebody's got an interest in keeping us alive.
It's almost like if you're playing, let's say, the game Sims, right?
Of course. I think a lot of these conversations may get back to the game Sims. So go ahead.
Everyone knows the game Sims. If you don't, it's basically you as the computer, you as the human, are controlling or creating an environment for these simulation humans to live in, and they will, on their own, act accordingly to whatever environment you put them in. But you add one more level to the game of Sims is when the characters start trying to figure out how they got into the game. That's us here. The sim might say to himself, hey, I have a house, I have a wife, I have a child, I have grass, I have food, I have a job. And then they go, I'm self-aware. How did I get here? Hey, did you go to the edge of this grid? How are these polygons formed? Who created the pattern? Who created this program? Who's controlling the program? Who changed the weather? wait a minute, maybe we're inside of a game. Like the game piece becomes aware of the game.
Okay, fair enough, because there is much more on
Yes,
that. I'm
yeah.
glad you kicked it off. Number 9 is a different sort of theory. What number 9 is some sort of an explanation for a seed of life. There is a theory that's called the directed panspermia theory. And what I want to start with is that there's actually a larger theory that's called a panspermia theory. The panspermia theory of existence is one that states that biological existence is transported throughout the universe by things like asteroids and meteoroids, or planets crashing into each other, or different things that are sort of involuntary modes of transport, where there is a life somewhere in the universe and it gets spread throughout the universe, sort of like a seeding, sort of like you hear about trees that spread to different parts of the world via birds eating their seeds and then dropping the seeds. That's exactly how I look at it, right? There's meteors that are the birds, and they are bringing spores or cells or some sort of biological matter from planet to planet. Number 9 is actually talking about is a directed panspermia theory, which insists that this is not involuntary, that there is a higher power that is sending molecules and atoms that would create life from planet to planet. And this was actually a theory that was created by Francis Crick. He was one of the two guys, Watson and Crick, that discovered DNA.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly what you would call his specialty, but that's who that guy was. Wow. Directed panspermia is the thought that it's not unintentional asteroids. It's like God throwing a baseball at a planet, and that baseball, when it hits the planet, it's going to explode, and there's going to be trees and people and everything everywhere. In July 2013, an astrobiologist named Milton Wainwright, he claimed that he found a seed of life. Now listen to this. He launched a weather balloon and he captured a metallic ball. The ball that was on the outside, it was titanium and a metal called vanadium. Now, when I say ball, I'm using that loosely. This ball is as big as a strand of hair. It's a rain droplet. It's 1,000th of a rain droplet is what this ball that he said he found. And he said this ball was not solid metal. On the inside of this titanium vanadium shell, there was a, quote, gooey biological liquid. All right. If you're playing Worst of the Best bingo right now, you can mark off gooey biological liquid.
Oh, center square.
Center square. So I actually did look further into this, and people are very skeptical of what he claims he saw or what he claims he found. He was then able to just study it himself, and he was never really able to describe what the gooey biological liquid is. But it was quite interesting because it's almost microscopically small that somehow he captured. It was somehow big enough to have a shell and then things inside of it. So it's very, very interesting. That would be proven. This would be evidence of a higher power, evidence that something created a metal ball. You wouldn't imagine that this thing would occur naturally. That's why they're calling it directed, right? So this metal ball with a liquid was intended to fly through space and hit our planet and then probably explode. And the gooey biological liquid is the metaphorical spark in the primordial ooze that will then create all of the life to come.
Well, I love the idea that this theory is called panspermia.
I heard you laugh when I said it. You couldn't help yourself, Ryan.
Well,
I heard you laugh when I said it.
Why did they just call it pangismia?
Oh, my goodness. I already had to say gooey biological liquid. This is the phrase that we're using. We are adults, Ryan. We are professionals. And we talk about gooey biological liquids. Go on.
If it was two female doctors that discovered this, it would be called Pam Icky Murray.
I don't want to hear it. Ryan, am I allowed to mute you?
Don't bee farmers do this kind of thing, like direct bees to pollinate?
And I find bees to be very fascinating. I want to reserve my answer to that question for our top 10 most interesting things about bees podcast. Yep.
Okay. Moving to number 8. Now, humans, as you probably know, and I didn't know we had this many genes, to be honest with you. I don't know how many we had, but I get confused between genes and other things in genomes. Humans are made up of 22,000 genes, or 3% of the human genome.
Weird. I've lived my whole life, Ryan, thinking that we were made up of 21,000 genes. I've been fooled this entire time.
Just so you know, the other 90% is junk DNA.
I did know that our DNA is largely controlled by a very small amount of it. So I did know that.
That's insane to me, that what we're made of is not what we're made of, or it's not being utilized. It's a really odd concept. So
to me, it's the sort of the same concept as when you hear that Homo sapiens are 0.3% DNA different than chimpanzees, right? There's just a smidge of DNA, and smidge is a scientific term. Go ahead, look it up. There's a smidge of DNA that differentiates us from chimpanzees. It's just a dollop of DNA that separates us from fish, probably. These are scientific references. I looked them up.
I was going to say, I don't think any podcast has ever used the word dollop yet. I think you might be the first one.
Hey, we're playing worst of the best bingo. I mean, get your cards, guys. $5 at the entry.
So the other 97% is junk DNA, which may contain a coded message or a designer tag if life originated elsewhere or was created by a higher being. In 2013, two Kazakhstan researchers claimed they found an ordered sequence of symbolic language in our junk DNA that would not have happened naturally. However, of course, many critics dismiss their, quote, biological SETI, that's a search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Alternatively, geneticist Francis Collins argued in his book, The Language of God, that DNA is God's alphabet and makes up the book of life, which is, of course, us, our bodies. The idea, again, that our bodies, the way they're designed, that we have feet and hands and noses and eyes, everything is where it is, and the way we procreate and the way that we get rid of our waste, everything just like this higher design of functionality. Is it just an accident that we function the way we do? Then our DNA itself, the code, like when you look at a cell and the coding of life, it does call into question of, this is where people will say, well, Ryan, you moron, why don't you believe in God? But only a God would create this. And my response is, I understand that I can't create this. And I understand that I don't know how anything gets put together. But this could then be proof for, yes, I agree with you, something higher than any human has ever lived put this together, or we literally are a accident.
It does seem like a far-fetched notion to believe that all of this is an accident. The way that nucleotide sequencing in DNA works, it's only 4 letters: the adenine, the cytosine, the guanine, and the thymine. Well, how does it boil down to just 4 letters? Sort of like binary code boils down to ones and zeros. Right. How can every technological advancement that we make be explained in ones and zeros, and every biological creature on the planet boils down to A, C, T, and G? So interesting that those things are, you can just get it down to that point. This piece of evidence is sort of considering like the creator as an author. They looked at it, they said that they found his signature in it. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's all the stuff that we have that makes us who we are. And then somewhere at the end of it all, he scratched his initials. People would look at this and they'd ask you why you don't believe in a God. I mean, it certainly does make me believe in creationism. It certainly does make me believe that a higher being of some sort. I don't know if we have to call it God.
And I know what's happening here, and I think people who are listening to this who believe in God might be saying, see, you guys. My argument back is that I believe the concept of a God who is watching us to see if we're good or bad, like Santa Claus. That's the problem. So I'm not saying that a higher being didn't create life or design it or have us function within it, but I don't know if that same being is calling upon us to worship them. And I don't know if that's the case any more than the sim in a computer game is worshiping the player.
As you would think that the sim does not acknowledge the existence of the creator. You just, in these instances, the one that you're worshiping, do you necessarily have to think that he's the omnipotent, the one that created all of it? It's sort of an interesting thing as a game developer, a god, you know what I mean? And
and I don't mean to use it as that humans are game pieces, but the idea that we exist and we are in an environment that we are functioning in. As a creator of, I've played Sims, you actually kind of care for these like players. You don't want them to get hungry. You don't want them. You try to give them all the freedom that they can, so to speak. And I don't think that we are being watched the way ants under a magnifying glass. I believe there's something up there that maybe does love and care about us. But and again, I think maybe we do have a reason to exist and to grow. I'm just wondering about the shame and guilt part of religion, and I'm wondering about the part of, if you don't do this, you'll be consigned to hell. I think it's the idea of hell and the eternal punishment for a temporary crime. It just makes no sense to me.
I still consider myself religious without maybe believing all of the stuff that's obviously hogwash. So,
and I'm just challenging the listeners that believe in a hell. Yeah. I'm asking them to ask themselves, what does hell mean to us as individuals?
Hell is an empty threat. Hell is a
That's my feeling too. That's my feeling.
Exactly. It's used to control people. This is why religion was so heavily intertwined with government in most of its existence. And even modern efforts to say that it's different do not really prove that point. Religion is heavily tied to government. Both are instruments of controlling populations for their own good or otherwise. But the promise of heaven or the threat of hell is just trying to keep you in line.
All right. Number 7.
That ventured very far off of DNA. These are very expansive topics, and I really, really enjoy them. The next one that we're going to talk about, number 7, is cosmic rays. I grew up as a pretty big comic book fan. Okay. Mm-hmm. And in the world of comic books, cosmic rays are the very first thing that gave the Fantastic Four their superpowers.
Oh, okay.
Cosmic rays have been introduced to me from a very young age as like this magical thing that, along with gamma radiation and super soldier serums, it's just one of the ways that superheroes become superheroes. Okay. But eventually you get into it and you're sort of asking yourself, like, what? Cosmic? I get cosmic. That means like from the universe, but rays of sunshine. So ray is actually a term that's a geometry term. There are 3 things that a thing can be. You can be a line. A line goes infinitely in both directions. A line never stops. Mm-hmm. You can be a segment, which is what people normally refer to as lines. Like if you go to a parking lot, the lines in the parking lot, those are not lines. Those are all segments, each and every one of them segments. A ray is something that has a definite starting point and an indefinite ending point.
Oh, okay.
And so that's exactly what we're talking about here. The existence of a cosmic ray is a piece of evidence that may explain a higher power because it has a starting point, but no ending point. What we have here is a philosopher named Nick Bostrom in 2003. He postulated that the universe is a computer simulation.
Yeah.
This is a theory that is accepted by Elon Musk and Neil deGrasse Tyson. Elon Musk has given a lot of speeches that say things to the effect of, you remember Pong, right? Do you remember Pong?
Pong, the game Pong. Yeah,
Pong, the video game Pong. Did you ever play it? Did you ever have it?
Yes, I did.
On the Atari?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Pong was amazing, and that was your first video game. In the mere 40 years since then, we now have what for video games? We now have open world, things like Red Dead Redemption that just totally immersive, almost indistinctive from reality video games. We create video games where millions of people can log onto the same server and be in the same environment at the same time. Just imagine what we have created in that 40 years. And his argument is, even if the progress screeches to a halt and we continue to make new video games, which is such a inappropriate word for the type of simulation that we're talking about. But this is how we relate it to it, video games.
It's the metaphor for it.
Yeah, it is. So Elon Musk, talking about video games, says even if we continue to make new video games that are only a tenth as much progressive as they have been, in 10,000 years, we will create a totally, fully immersive alternate reality that is indistinguishable from the one that we live in. Right?
You could argue that's what we're in now, then.
Many people have. Rene Descartes in the 1600s asked the question, how can I prove that I'm not dreaming all the time? He didn't know what a video game was, but that's essentially what we're talking about. Yeah. He could not find a way to prove that he's not just dreaming all of this. I don't know why you would dream a Zoom call to do a podcast when you could dream a lot of different things, but he pretty much believed that it was impossible to prove that you were not dreaming. And so this video game thing comes up, and that's our sort of modern thing. So Elon Musk actually says it's like 1 in a billion chance that we are not in a video game right now. That's what he believes.
That's crazy.
Or that we would be able to create it and future generations would do that. So that's where we sort of are. But then what we talk about is that no matter what video game it is, it's going to be created by a computer, and it's going to have a limit. It's going to have a limit somewhere. And the way that researchers believe that we can detect if we are in a computer simulation is to try and find that limit. Try to find where is the outskirts, where is the point where it's just polygons or whatever it is, or you can't continue walking, where is that barrier? And to test this, they built computer simulators on a lattice and a quantum computer. And they focused on cosmic rays. They focused on if they could determine that cosmic rays, they have a starting position. The cosmic rays are atom fragments that come from outside the solar system. They don't give you superpowers, just to clarify my earlier statements, at least as far as I know. Cosmic rays, they have a finite amount of power and they deteriorate over time. So that's interesting. They try to determine why it is that when every cosmic ray gets to Earth eventually, whether or not that's its design designation or not, but all the ones that get to Earth, they get to Earth with similar amounts of energy, which indicates to them if they're degrading over time, if they're degrading equivalently over time, then they all started at the same place. And
there's the rub. That's the rub.
That is the edge of the universe. That is where the creator is. That is the point of departure for these cosmic rays that are eventually coming at us.
It's weird, man. It
is, right?
Because at the end of the day, these theories shouldn't exist with any kind of scientific proof if they didn't happen the way they ended up happening. Let's say they had the cosmic ray theory, but they came to us at different amounts of energy all over the place.
I don't know if you'd have a cosmic ray theory if you might investigate it and you come to the conclusion, oh, okay, so they're all different. I think what we're looking at in the same time when we look at these simulations, we're looking at constants and we're also looking at glitches. They try to create the simulation that has some rules to it. Those are the constants. But we're also trying to see if there's glitches, if they've messed it up somehow, because I don't think that any of us really believe that any simulation or a computer game or whatever would be perfect.
Bugs and updates.
Yeah, there's going to be something somewhere where it just didn't all work out. There was a 1 where there should have been a 0.
Number 6, in 2015, a study from the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics suggested that life could have spread via panspermia, moving star to star in clusters and overlapping like bubbles in a pot of boiling water. So this simulation also suggests that life could have spread like an epidemic. Scientists tested 2 possibilities for bringing life to Earth, one by asteroids and by intelligent beings. The result was that both were possible and would have followed the same pattern. If correct, this study also indicates that life exists elsewhere in the galaxy. I kind of like this theory because the idea is we are studying asteroids from other kind of pass through Earth or have hit the Earth. We've taken stuff from this and we've discovered that there's life and evidence of life outside, of course, of millions of light years away on these rocks, that they carry a history just the same way we find fossil fuels on our own planet. I think this is where you can have your cake and eat it too if you're religious, in the sense that if you want to believe in creationism, that it was truly Adam and Eve, it came out of the garden, but why do we have dinosaurs? I believe the Earth has other histories that hit it, that were parts or taken from other parts of other planets and put onto this planet. I don't know. Or the dinosaurs are a glitch. I don't know. A lot of this is just insane to me. I just don't understand what's happening. But I do believe there's life elsewhere. But what I find so frustrating about that idea that there's life elsewhere, I don't know why we're not in contact with them in a very public way. Curious what the reasons are that we just, I don't know. Hey, fellow planet people, what's going on over there? How you guys handling stuff? You ever watch Star Trek?
Not really, no.
Well, Star Trek has a philosophy. So their Starship Enterprise explores strange new worlds and new lives and civilizations, but they have a policy called the Prime Directive.
Okay.
And the Prime Directive is they don't make contact with planets who don't have technology at their level or higher. Their Starship Enterprise was to actually contact our planet, let's say. they wouldn't make contact with us because they have technology that we don't have.
I think that's exactly it. It's sort of overwhelmingly arrogant to believe that we have it and no one else does. I wouldn't expect them to be able, maybe not even able to communicate with us or understand us or relate to us in any way. If we made contact with them, they would likely be so much further advanced from us.
Would it be like us trying to communicate with a slug?
I think so, or the way that we consider like the populations of insects on our planet. We do live amongst them, but we certainly can't understand them. And
if they truly are higher beings, like we just stated, and they are interested in what we're doing, they are of such an intelligence and understanding that they know that, kind of like the Prime Directive,
sure,
that exposing themselves, it might satiate our curiosity, but it does nothing for them. They're not Kim Kardashians of the universe. They don't need likes and upvotes. They know they exist. They know their understanding of the universe, and they just will allow us to get there when we're ready.
The only thing that may provoke them to introduce themselves of us is if they wanted the resources of our little ball of rock here.
Transformers, that's what happened. The Decepticons, for our listeners who probably don't know, so there was a battle on, what was the name of their planet again?
I don't remember the names.
Okay, so the Transformers lived on a robotic planet, and they had a civil war. The Decepticons and the Transformers crashed on Earth, fleeing their planetary war. And they needed to leave the Earth to go back to their planet, but they needed energy from the Earth to fill up their cubes. And the Decepticons were willing to basically exploit the planet's resources, and the Autobots were like, "No, you're not going to deplete this Earth's resources for our own needs. We suck. We destroyed our own planet. It sucks for us. We're not going to." So the Autobots, they stopped the Decepticons from usurping the Earth's resources.
True story. History was changed forever.
Yes. So thank you, Optimus Prime, for that. So. May he rest in peace.
Going back to some of the pop culture that I've absorbed about
Energon cubes. That's what
you got it.
Sorry. Okay, sorry. I was like, what is that? Yeah, they used to fill up these. I love the effect of when they filled up the Energon cubes. Okay, sorry, go on.
Yeah, there's a good amount of pop culture out there that does see either aliens as highly advanced benevolent entities or malevolent entities. The Marvel Comics universe has established a large number of godlike alien entities by benefit of their own separate evolution. They're just so far beyond us. Some stories, they are the reason why life exists here. They were the directed panspermia. It is interesting to think of them as either malevolent or benevolent. I'm not sure in either instance whether I want us to make contact with those beyond our understanding sorts of entities. This is a scientific hint that says that there was a study that said that it was equally possible that it was directed panspermia versus regular panspermia, right? That's what this one is about. So how would you even do a study? I mean, it's a lot of interrelated equations,
a lot of math.
Unobservable sorts of conclusions that you go, we crunched all the numbers. Trying to explain to you how many numbers we crunched, we couldn't do it. But this is what we came up with, is that it's equally likely that involuntary asteroids brought it here as it is that God threw a baseball.
Enough with the spermia. Let's move on to the next one.
All right. I think that is our last panspermia. So for people that are looking for more panspermia content in the podcast form, follow us on our new podcast launching next week, the Best of the Panspermia podcast. All Ryan, very excited to get into that with you.
Yeah. Can't wait.
Number 5 on our list, evidence of a higher being. This is what we call physical constants. According to theoretical physicist John Barrow, we can tell if the universe is a simulation by looking for mistakes or errors in it. I am presuming, but I don't know. Have you seen the movie The Matrix?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay. In the movie The Matrix, what is the glitch in The Matrix, Ryan?
That's going to kill me. I mean, I've seen it multiple times, but I haven't seen it. Probably seen it twice in 20 years, it feels like.
Do you remember the cat? The cat in the first Matrix movie, and they repeated this a couple of other times, but the cat gave Neo a feeling of deja vu. Morpheus then explained to Neo deja vu, or the feeling, the perception, the internal thought that you have when you think that you're seeing the same thing you've seen before.
Yes.
Deja vu is how you see a glitch in the Matrix. And the way that Neo experiences was he saw the same cat walking the same way in the same place that he thought that he had before. That's what that movie looked at. And there's so much to explain about the movie The Matrix and how it talks about computer simulations. I think there are two kinds of computer simulation theory. And you've discussed one, which is the Sims theory. The Sims theory, I think, can be described as God created a video game and all of the characters, and then at some point in that video game, he gave the characters in the video game consciousness.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's what it is. To boil that down, it is to say that human beings do not exist, but there are simulations of human beings that think that they exist, and they live in a computer simulation. Right?
Yeah.
So you follow that. That's the Sims computer simulation. The difference with that and the Matrix simulation, what is it? That there are things called human beings, but they live in vats of goo and they don't have any real experiences. They just think that they do. As we talk about them and what the Matrix posed and what it said about we are all living on a destroyed, depleted resource planet, and the machines make us think that we are experiencing things so that we create some sort of something energy that allows them to whatever. Your Sims thing is sort of sadder, is that humans do not exist. There's just a bunch of megabytes running around that think that they're humans and that they exist.
Right.
That's a rougher one. This is what John Barrow was talking about. There would be notable glitches in the Matrix if it was a simulation, such as changes in physical constants. These are physical properties like the speed of light. Okay, we think that we've calculated the speed of light. It's math. It's consistent. In 2001, though, Australian researchers discovered that the speed of light is slowing. What do? The speed of light is slower than we thought it was, or it's getting slower over time.
It slows down when it gets older.
Speed of light is over the hill. You know something about that, don't you, Ryan?
Oh, stop it.
Yikes. The astronomer John Webb also discovered that light from a quasar, I don't even want to try and explain what a quasar is, had absorbed the wrong type of photons on its 12 billion year journey to Earth. So why would it do that? We believe that a quasar should absorb certain types of protons or photons. It absorbed the wrong kind. Why is it not following the rules? We thought that there were rules. So this is what he's saying. This could only happen. The speed of light changes. Photons are the wrong ones. Could only happen if there was a change in a physical constant. No one is sure why physical constants stay constant, but we have to rely on them. We think that these are the rules of the universe. And if somehow the rules of the universe get broken, well, that's evidence of a glitch. That's evidence that we are either in a Sims universe or in a Matrix where we're seeing some deja vu.
Boy, all I know is that if this world was dependent on me to figure this stuff out, we would be still eating raw meat.
Well, sushi's all right.
I guess if I lived in that part of the world, yeah. I don't even know how people figure this stuff out. Even if all their theories are hogwash, but the fact that they're able to piece together some sort of mathematical equations and to think this way, like to even measure the speed of light, I don't understand. Hey, wait a second there. We're getting the wrong quasar.
Did you guys see that quasar? It had all the wrong photons on it. All the wrong photons.
So the light reaching the Earth isn't quite reaching at the speeds that we had. So either the math was wrong at the beginning, or it's right now or wrong now. I don't know.
A lot of times science can and should admit that it was wrong.
Yeah.
We're always trying to endeavor to get better. We are always trying to better understand our universe and what's going on and how can we, if not manipulate it, at least adapt to what the rules are. The more knowledge that we have, the better chances that we have to thrive and all of that. What I think that this is evidence of, when your iPhone 4 just won't work anymore.
Right.
I feel like the simulator, the developer of the simulation, is giving up on those updates and that downloadable content.
Yeah. That's interesting. Like, is our software patch need an update maybe? Or
exactly.
Do we need like, who knows? Everything has a mathematical equation. It just blows my mind. That is the universal language is math. So every scientific discovery is actually through math that it's proven. Why don't we use math to prove God? A 1940s physicist Kurt Gödel tried to prove the existence of God with mathematical proof. It is based on this argument by Saint Anselm of Canterbury. So here's the argument. This is really interesting. This is a great philosophical argument, I think.
I like it.
Yeah, it's good. So, number one, there is a great being called God, and nothing greater than God can be imagined. What is more God than God? Can do all, can know all. Like, what is more than that? How can you know all plus one?
No, my only thought to add to that is why can't there be two?
There, you could just say gods. That's fine. So a godlike individual.
And I don't think that destroys his argument at all. He just never refers to them in the plural.
That's right. You could say there is a great being called great beings.
There you go.
Or all-powerful, all-knowing beings. And nothing greater than all-powerful, all-knowing beings can be imagined. So, 2, God exists as an idea in the mind. 3, with all other things being equal, a being that exists in both the mind and reality is better than a being that only exists in the mind. 4, therefore, if God only exists in the mind, then it's possible that we can imagine a being more powerful than the mind. If you have imagined, for example, Superman, the most powerful comic book, then I can imagine kryptonite that can injure him. Because you came up with the idea of God, there is nothing that is more powerful and all-knowing than a God. So how can God exist? Yeah, it would have to exist, or how did you come up with it?
There it is.
Dumb it down for people like me. Number 5. Fair. Thank you. I don't have a doctorate in anything. I have a doctor's appointment, but all right, 5. However, that contradicts argument 1 because nothing greater than God can be imagined. So 6, therefore, God exists.
Everything is contingent upon assuming there is a great being called God and nothing greater than God can be imagined. This all hinges on that. This all hinges on us all agreeing that this is correct. The second part of that sentence creates the first. Let's take it as just the second part of the sentence, okay? So let's call number 1, nothing greater than God can be imagined. If there is the greatest thing, that thing is God. And because we call it the greatest thing, we don't have a word for greater than greatest. Greatest is the greatest. If there is a greatest thing, we've just named it as the greatest thing that ever can be imagined. That's the semantics of it. Nothing greater than God can be imagined. Because we've imagined it, number 2, God exists as an idea in the mind. Of course, we've imagined it. The definition of an imagining is an idea in the mind. So boom, you got number 1 and number 2 right there. The third one is weird the way it's phrased because I don't like this whole with all other things being equal part.
Okay, sure. That's St. Aslam's wording, but yeah.
Being that exists in both the mind and reality is better than a being that only exists in the mind. Sure. It's not to say that you can't imagine something that doesn't exist, but it is to say if you have an imagination, that's cool. But if that thing actually existed, it would be greater than the thing that you imagine. And we're talking about the greatest thing. So what we're saying is if you imagined a thing and it existed, that thing that exists is greater than your imagined thing. And then they say, therefore, if God only exists in the mind, then it's possible that we can imagine it being more powerful than God. If God only exists in the mind, then that thing that exists in the mind and in reality is greater. So that thing in your mind is not the greatest thing. You're not actually thinking of the greatest thing because you haven't gone far enough to put it in reality yet. And then they say, however, that contradicts our argument 1 because nothing greater than God can be existed. And that's what we said. Nothing greater than God can be imagined. And so therefore God exists because if you can imagine it, that's cool, but it would be greater if you imagine it and it existed. And so then that's the greatest thing. You've now trumped your own imagination and it must exist because that's the greatest thing. It's circular and that's why it proves itself.
Good old philosophy. Loves to be circular.
They're just substituting the word God for the greatest possible thing. That's all they're doing. What you essentially say at the end, therefore, the greatest possible thing exists. Okay, I believe you, you know? Number 3 here, this piece of evidence that a higher power exists is the fact that reality doesn't exist unless we're looking at it.
There was a philosopher that came up with this one, didn't philosophy lessons I remember from many moons ago, but I forget the guy's name. The idea that if we're not observing that universe, it's literally not existing behind us when we close the door.
Well, that is one of the tenets of very, very long-standing principle of philosophy called empiricism. Descartes was the one that said there's nothing empirically that can prove that I'm not dreaming. He could not come up with anything. He was a skeptic, and so everything was subject to doubt. Every smell, every taste, every feel, every view, I suppose. So all of that was subject to doubt, and he just tore himself apart. He could not prove any of that was real. But in this instance, a video game is parts of code, and those parts of code allow you to experience and see and interact with different things, but only while you're there. There's a million different open world games that are so expansive, but it's not showing you everything at the same time. Right. When you're on level 2 in Super Mario, you're not seeing level 10. It's there once you get there, but that's sort of the process of a computer saving processing space. And I mean, what good would it do to show you a level you're not on anyways? What this piece of evidence proposes is the mysterious phenomenon in quantum mechanics called superposition. A superposition is when you're looking at, like, say you're looking at a wall, you're looking at a bunch of atoms and a bunch of neutrons, protons, electrons interacting with each other to create a wall. But once you get down and actually observe what's going on in the quantum space of that wall, you would be observing things that are not really meant to be observed. And what that means is that they have not, and this is the really weird thing, they have not really decided what they are yet.
Yes, yeah.
They exist in a state of superposition because they're not really meant to be observed. So they're either an electron or what we have here is deciding in a dual state where subatomic particles are either waves or they're particles. Yeah. So something could be a wave where it is not defined as a particle object, something that is described as like a singular item that you would see breaking down. It's just not meant to be viewed that way. But once we break it down, we get subatomic, we use certain instruments, and we look at it, it changes into what it is, either a particle or a wave, as we look at it. That is the evidence that the code is really working to give us the perception that we need, which is 5 senses and this and that. And we're using these new scientific instruments to really get behind the scenes. And behind the scenes is not meant to be viewed. It's not even in a state right now. It's in a state of uncertainty because it's really not expecting you to look at it. It really hasn't decided what it is. They make this anthropomorphization of these tiny, tiny, tiny subatomic particles is that they are not what they are until we look at them and then they decide. And
yeah,
so
that's I've heard of that experience. It's crazy.
Schrodinger's cat was the response to this quantum mechanics announcement that they came up with superpositioning. In this announcement, or in this rebuttal to superpositioning, he said that saying that something is either a wave or a particle until you look at it is like saying a cat in a box is both dead and alive until you open the box to see.
Right.
He came up with all of these other different things to explain why you would put a cat in a box and it might die while it was in the box. And I won't get into all of that. But essentially he was saying if we are cut off from observing something, then we cannot know what it is. And once we look at it, we sort of make it what it is. We determine, and until then, it's both. And we have to admit that. Schrodinger didn't like that, but that's what we are here. And I think that these foundations of our reality, which as we're boiling it down to quantums and this and that, these foundations of our reality are maybe indicators that this is that other side of the map on Red Dead Redemption, where there's a coding there for you to be able to see it, but it's not there until you get there.
The idea that something hasn't decided yet, like things that we take for granted, the door is the door, the window's the window, but it doesn't know what it is until we look at it. That's a really odd, basically it snaps to attention when we're in its presence.
You're right. Maybe you explain by some people that say perception is reality in the sense that we sort of make the world what it is by the way that we can observe it. Or
maybe that explains drugs and LSD and acid.
they find another level of existence, or they find another reality.
Just the idea, what their observable universe. That's why they're scared and they panic. They have bugs crawling under their skin. In their reality, they do.
In their reality, they do, and they create that themselves by what they've done, to their five senses or their mind or what have you.
So very interesting, yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, number 2. In 1997, theoretical physicist Juan Maldacena proposed that our universe is a 2-dimensional hologram, completely flat, that we perceive in 3 dimensions. So tiny strings called gravitons vibrate to create this holographic universe. If correct, this would help solve some differences between quantum mechanics and Einstein's theory of gravity. So some studies show that a 2D universe is possible. Japanese researchers computed the internal energy of a black hole, the event horizon position, and other properties in a 3D world, and then computed the same in a 2D world with no gravity. The calculations matched. Another model showed that the universe is a 2D if space-time is flat. Researchers at Fermilab are using a giant laser to, quote, look for holographic noise, which is evidence of buffering in the cosmos. If a 3D holographic universe built on a 2D system of moving lines like those of coding lags, that strongly indicates that the universe is a simulation, a flat simulation, like you would look at on your computer screen. What I found interesting here was when they took away gravity, there are some speculation that gravity itself is not a proven science, that we don't know what gravity is. I think Neil deGrasse has actually said this before, that we actually don't know what gravity is. But what I'm getting at, that's what they're doing with the 2D model, is they're making our world flat. And they're saying you take away the gravity in a 2D world, it has the same calculations as a 3D world with gravity. So something to do with the gravity.
It is something to do with gravity, and I think maybe what they're getting at and what I'm looking at this as, if the 2D world is a simulation, do we agree that this is some sort of another simulation argument that we're looking at here?
I think the idea that it's a 2D hologram. So not just a simulation so much as almost that there's buffering. That it's almost like it's almost like a projection from something.
There's certainly room in philosophy for allegories of projection. Have you heard of Plato's cave? What they believe that they're experiencing as reality in the cave is actually shadows on a wall.
Right.
But because of their conditioning and because they don't know anything else, they perceive that as all that there is. And they create their own perception of it is altered to think that this is what reality is, when it's very clearly just shadows on a wall. This is a 2D hologram, a 2D simulation, that the reason why we perceive it in 3D could be that additional component of whatever gravity is. There's got to be some reason, they being the creators of this 2D hologram, there's got to be some way that they think that they can fool us into thinking it's 3D. And the secret sauce is gravity, whatever gravity is. And maybe it's not constant enough for us to really call it a law of nature or this and that. And I think that's what you were getting at. But we do know that it's important. And if this was a 2D hologram being projected at us and we believe it's 3D, well, maybe the reason we believe it's 3D is because of whatever gravity is, whatever it is. It may not be a law of nature. It may not be constant enough. There may be glitches in it and things that can't be explained. It would have to be the 2D hologram plus something in order for us to think that it's 3D.
I don't feel gravity. I just know we don't float. I don't know. It's weird.
You know that we don't float.
We don't float. All right. You have the last one.
I do. I have the last one. And this one is somewhat different than some of the others. What this one is called coding in the cosmos. So there is a theoretical physicist named Sylvester James Gates. He's a very well-dressed man.
I've seen
fantastic beard. I really love his look.
Yeah.
He says that there's compelling evidence suggesting that we're living in a simulation.
Yeah.
While working on superstring equations with adinkras, which is a algebraic symbol, this man found coding created by another mathematician that was called doubly even self-dual linear binary error correcting block codes. Now, if you're interested in more chat about doubly even self-dual linear binary error correcting block codes, listen to mine and Ryan's new podcast, The Worst of the Doubly Even Self dual linear binary error correcting block codes coming to your podcast soon. Gates questioned if this basic coding is somehow responsible for controlling the universe. And what he said was that these adinkras, which are called equations, but they look. Have you seen the movie Good Will Hunting? We've talked about Good Will Hunting, right?
Yeah.
This math that doesn't even look like math. It's symbols. It sort of looks like hieroglyphics. They call it math. It's like how equations work out when you put thousands of them together, I suppose. So he says that these equations, these adinkras, are the equations that we want to use to describe the cosmos. And so that's the language that I would use. That's the evidence that we're talking about here. The scientific hint is these equations that we want to use to determine the cosmos look like computer code. They are almost indistinguishable, he said, from the computer code that goes into a Google search. That's what he used.
Right.
So you can imagine computer code and coding and the way that, you want to instruct a computer processor with instructions. When we come up with equations to describe our universe, they look just like that. And he says that these are highly technical references that him and his team have only been working on for 2 years, that almost nobody in the world would understand. But he just sees these similarities between Google code and other computer code, ones and zeros and what have you, with these adinkras, which are these massively compiled equations. And he says these codes may be ubiquitous in nature and could even be embedded in the essence of reality. When you say the word embedded, you're talking about code. That's what he's saying. So he's trying to describe our reality or our understanding of reality in these computer terms. And he also calls it technical gobbledygook. So that's what we're dealing with here. Number one on our list, scientific hint, is a bunch of technical gobbledygook.
My brain's fried.
This one was so tough to understand. I didn't know what he was saying. He's showing these symbols.
I think I saw one of his videos. I swear it was this guy, and he was basically just saying that he's literally has seen code in the ground.
Right. That's what they're trying to say. That's what they're trying to say to us. It's code in the equations that we try to use to explain the ground.
Right.
It's this much longer explanation of what it is.
Well, I hope our listeners, first and foremost, at the end of the day, we want our listeners to maybe challenge or maybe not challenge their own beliefs, but just think about what does it mean to be here? Maybe the science helps explain it. Maybe the idea there's a higher being that helps you feel more calm about being here, that your life is not nihilistic. That there's a reason why you're here. Things do matter. You can learn and live and grow while you're here. Great minds are trying to figure out, hey, what is here? Why is here?
I'm always interested in trying to answer these sort of unanswerable questions. I don't know what it would mean to the common person to have a higher understanding. I don't know if Elon Musk was very, very clear when he said, and we've dealt with several of these that deal with computer simulation, one of the various types, that he didn't seem to mind the thought. It may or may not be releasing for people, maybe to understand what it is that they're dealing with. Maybe it gives their lives more importance, less stress or less pressure or what have you. I'm not sure. What would your thought be if you found out tomorrow that it's all a video game?
I wouldn't do anything harmful. I wouldn't.
Harmful? Okay.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't. It's not like the Purge. I would go out and start murdering, killing.
That's not the direction I was headed. Well, you think people would just sort of lose meaning in their life and they'd start being more cathartic?
I guess what I'm trying to say is, if it was the idea that nothing would change, no. If I found out it was a little simulation, well, within this game, I'm going to play by the rules. I don't want to go to jail.
And you're doing pretty well. You got a nice family.
Well, that's what I mean. I guess that's what I'm trying to say is, I'm not expressing myself very well.
You're winning the game.
No, what I mean is if I literally found out proof that we are in a simulation, well, within the simulation and what I'm experiencing, I don't want to go to jail. I want to have a job. I want to take care of my family, the relationships I have with my wife and kids and parents and brothers and friends, the podcast I'm doing. I wouldn't want to change anything because for whatever reason, this is the existence I'm existing in, however I got here.
I think that I would probably go the same way. There's a lot of different different maybe hypotheticals in pop culture that you've seen maybe of this whole thing, and the person always tends to go crazy or what have you. Then you may have some people like that, but
it would be. I think there would be a lot like that. I think there might be a little bit more like people already are egotistical, narcissists, and sociopaths. So I think if they were given true knowledge that life could be Grand Theft Auto with no consequences, I think we might have issues.
If scientists figured it out, do you think they would be right to not tell us?
I think it would be their right to tell us. I think it would be it would be their duty to tell us. Like they've always told us what they found. I think withholding it just because they discovered it, then they're making the moral choice for us. I don't think they have, though they had the brains to figure it out, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate their understanding, but then what gives them that right to withhold information?
It would just be paternalism. It would just be, we've decided that withholding this information is best for the planet.
Well, then we'd riot in the streets and burn down businesses.
We wouldn't if we didn't know.
No.
We wouldn't if they withheld it from us and we didn't know they withheld it from us, we would not know.
We would know. We'd find out. Just like we're finding out right now that they're looking. There's no way that people like Elon Musk, at least is all a con. And join us on our next episode of another conspiracy theory episode.
We've launched several new podcasts during this episode. I'm thrilled.
All right. Well, let's run down the 10. And I guess for the criteria, for me, I think the criteria will be what is the least likely to be true?
Oh, really? Least likely to be true? No, I'm not going with that.
What's your reasoning?
The one that didn't seem the best explained, at least in my mind,
Well, that could fall into the one that's...
It certainly could. They just didn't give me enough to think it was true. There's one on this list that I just really don't like. I mean, with several of them sort of covering the same territory, I think that there's clear vagueness to some of them where the other ones were a little more clear.
So how I'm looking at it is all of them are true except for one.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Like,
you live in a panspermia computer simulation, don't you?
Yeah, the spermia is definitely happening.
You've got the piece of evidence in number 10 that is it's just so impossible that life would exist. And you talk about the Higgs field.
Sure.
That's your little piece of evidence. And number 9, the piece of evidence is a little ball that a guy said that he found that shows directed panspermia. And number 8, the piece of evidence that I think we looked at is that there's some researchers claim that they saw somebody's signature in the DNA. Right. So that's our piece of evidence.
Like a calling card.
Right. Number 7, the evidence that we think that we found, the scientific hint, would be the fact that cosmic rays all come from the same place if we look at their amount of energy. Number 6, the one that we found is that there's a study that shows that it is mathematically just as possible of directed panspermia as indirected or regular panspermia. So that's a study, not a ball that they found, but a study. I'm going to say it as many times as possible, Ryan. This is the worst of the panspermia podcast. Number 5, we just see the piece of evidence that we found was that the speed of light is slowing, and that may mean that physical constants are breaking down. Number 4, the one that you talked about at length and we tried to break down, was Gödel's ontological proof, the circular logic that gets you to the fact that the greatest thing ever is the greatest thing ever. Number 3 is the one that reality doesn't exist until we're looking at it. The piece of evidence is superpositioning. Number 2 is your holographic principle, which people have studied that if not for gravity, everything is 2D. So there's your evidence there. And the one that we found, number 1, is that adinkras look like computer code. That's our evidence. Do you want to say what your least favorite was?
Well, thank you for that rundown. As always, you're a very intelligent, well-spoken individual. I'm just a schmutt. I don't know what I'm doing over here.
You don't have to say that about yourself. I'm sure our comments and followers, will do that for you.
Oh, thank you. I think the one for me, my criteria for worst of the best proof that there is a higher beings out there is the holographic principle, that we're a 2D image on a screen almost, that we're just a projection of some sort of reality. I tend to lean towards more computer simulation or coding within the network of our life. I get behind that more than just the fact that we are literally a no-gravity 2D projection.
For a list like this where there's so many different ideas, I guess I am maybe a little surprised, but we agree.
Oh, wow. Wow.
We do. This one did the worst job of sort of selling me on that.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it. It was the one that, yeah, if that's what I mean. If I had to put money down on 9 of them and not one of them, it'd be this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
The beauty of all this is, Drew, we actually have no idea.
No, not a clue. we could spend thousands more dollars on education and still not know.
But number 10 for me is the most important one. The fact that we exist is the biggest.
I think that's probably the biggest one. It's not quite with some evidence, with some oomph to it. This field, this ghost energy field.
I'm just saying that just the idea that we exist, just the idea that we are, is to me evidence that something is going on.
I'm with you. I don't think it's unintentional. I really don't.
No.
I don't worship that creator as an unfallible moral guide, but I do believe that there was some sort of a creator or multiple creators. I do.
And then does that creator love us? That's the philosophical question. That's the religious question. That's the spiritual question. Does that which created us love us? I don't know.
You know me. I've always been pretty outright that I know that I'm undeserving of love, and I never will be. So wow. I have no expectations on that end. Right.
All right. Well, on that note, remember, in front of every silver lining, there's a cloud. And we're here to help you find it. Thank you so much, Drew, for coming on. I do appreciate it. It's good to hear your voice again. I'm sure we'll have you on again.
It's been a pleasure. I'm glad to see that you're doing well. And brace for winter. It's coming, my man.
It is coming. That is another constant in this simulation. Whoever programmed this, why couldn't they just make it tropical weather all year long? I don't know.
If your winter is 1 degree warmer than usual, it's a glitch in the Matrix, Ryan. Ooh, these constants.
All right, brother. Have a good one.
Have a very good day. Take care, everyone.
And again, congratulations to, insert edit here, Mr. Biden. All right, all the best, U.S.
Whew.
All right, brother. Take care.
Take care of yourself. Bye.
Gamma Gator Productions.